It is the 22nd of June 1941. Operation Barbarossa, German attack to the Soviet Union, has just begun. 138 German divisions, plus allies, are facing 228 Russian divisions. The two largest armies ever fielded in history are now actively fighting each other. So, there were a lot of divisions on the Eastern Front that day, but what is a division? I am the Crow. Welcome to Millennium 7. In the first episode of this three-part series, we have seen how the concept of division was born and grew to become an essential building block of the 19th century's armies. In the second episode, we explored the golden age of the division, the two world wars. In this episode, we are going to see how, in the post-war world, the division morphed into something entirely new. Before getting started, please like, dislike, subscribe and share with your friends on social media, because I need your support to keep going and improving. Otherwise, if you think that this channel and its author are better left to rot on the roadside, well then just do nothing, your call. But now, let's get started. In the West, the military organizations tried to achieve a good compromise between the defensive and the offensive performances. The Second World War triangular divisions had demonstrated to be effective and versatile, so right after the war, the organization was retained. In Korea, the equipment and the organization were basically the same as in the Second World War. However, during the siege of Busan, US and South Korea's division's frontage was much wider. The perimeter miraculously held against the North Korean forces, but something new was happening. In the new nuclear era, the capacity to operate with highly dispersed forces was considered essential to reduce the effectiveness of nuclear weapons. In the late 50s, the American Potomac Division, with 5 battle groups the size of a reinforced battalion, revealed itself a dead end, and the duration of the experiment was limited. It was too difficult to control, with each battle group commander managing 5 fighting units, plus the other assets that could be added when deployed on the battlefield. Various NATO and SEATO countries experimented with it with similar negative results. However, the concept of dispersion pushed forward an idea that was already emerging during the war. As units move and fight, they encounter different terrain and different types of enemy forces. Each tactical situation requires a different mix of units and weapons to be dealt effectively. With the forces dispersed on a large area, the appropriate units and weapons may not be available until it's too late. A way of dealing with this issue was to make the force organization flexible enough to provide the best mix of forces when needed. A good example of this is the American Road Divisional Organization, which will last from 1965 to the years immediately following the end of the Cold War, with few modifications. It was a large and well-equipped base structure capable of sustained operations with organic artillery, which supported 3 combined armed brigade-level commands. 3 to 5 battalions were assigned to the brigade depending on the specific circumstances. An infantry division had 8 infantry and 2 armored battalions. An armored division had 6 armored and 5 mechanized infantry battalions. A mechanized infantry division had 3 armored battalions and 7 mechanized infantry battalions. The traditional regiments became peacetime organizations which supplied the brigade with the battalions to be assembled inside the framework of the divisional structures as seen fit in a specific situation. Now, more than ever, The division is the container which the appropriate mix of forces can be extracted from according to the necessity of the fight. This mix and match approach also percolated down the organizational chain. In an infantry battalion, an infantry company could be replaced by a tank company, and an infantry platoon in a company could be replaced by a tank platoon. When deployed on the field and organized to fight, battalions and companies melted away to be replaced by task forces and combat teams. This type of organization was also adopted by other NATO countries with different degrees of integration, but nonetheless the concept remained the same. So, the NATO forces deployed in the Central European region at the height of the Cold War resembled a homogeneous blob of all the imaginable weapons, with little diversifications among the units. The people looking out to the west from the other side of the inner German border knew this well, and they were very, very perplexed. The Soviet army ended the war as the most powerful army in the world. While it recognized the importance of combined arms and support, it had taken a completely different direction. In the West, the division was designed as a unit capable of fighting autonomously for days. It was recognized that its reason to exist was the capacity to be more effective than the sum of its parts. Hence, its structure had to be mostly intact to be effective. NATO forces, as a rule of thumb, considered that a 10% of losses was enough to retire and reorganize a unit. For the Soviets, a division was a combined arms unit to be used and then thrown away. Soviet doctrine, derived from the World War II experience, was heavily bent toward the offensive. The success had to be obtained by concentrating forces and firepower in crucial areas to breach the enemy defenses, thus allowing the armored mobile forces to penetrate, encircle and destroy the NATO formations. In this process, the division had to liberally spend its assets to wear the defender off. A division left with about 40% of its original force was then retired and its assets reorganized and amalgamated with the remains of other similarly depleted divisions. For this reason, mixing and matching different units was less important. Everything was going to be concentrated in the focus of the offensive anyway. So, the division organization was less flexible and it was ready for a fight just out of the box. A motorized rifle regiment had 3 rifle battalions, 1 tank battalion and 1 artillery battalion permanently assigned to it. A tank regiment had 3 tank battalions, 1 rifle battalion and 1 artillery battalion. A motorized rifle division had 3 infantry regiments, 1 tank regiment and 1 artillery regiment. A tank division had 3 tank regiments, a motorized rifle regiment and 1 artillery regiment. As you can see, there was a combined arms approach, but the integration didn't go below the battalion level and there were still recognizable units of different arms. The scaffolding of the division was robust, providing a large variety of different weapons and support units, but its numeric strength was lower than the NATO counterparts. It was assumed that the organization had to last just for a few days before being retired and reorganized. Also, the losses were assumed to be high, so an extra capacity was not needed. The difference between the two schools of thought was radical. Soviet planners believed that the NATO approach was self-defeating. Rather than focusing all the available force in the decisive point, it appeared, the Western armies distributed their resources evenly, making it easier for a concentrated force to break through. We will never know who was right, luckily, but it is my opinion that a conventional confrontation in Central Europe would have easily resembled a high-technology version of the First World War, with one side keen to throw in as many resources as it could, and the other patiently grinning down the attacking forces while wearing itself off in the process. As I already said, luckily, we will never discover which side was going to come out on top. However, Soviet planners had the opportunity to test their doctrine in several occasions. The Arab-Israeli Wars of 1967 and 1973 and the Second Gulf War in 1991 showed them how the West might have had a point. After all, the fall of the Soviet Union was the opportunity to put in practice the new lessons. The present-day Russian army, with its new organization, derives from the lessons learned in the Middle East. Where our story ends here. In the post-Cold War world, made of asymmetric warfare, peace enforcing and counterinsurgency, the division doesn't play a decisive role. The name is still in use, but it is often designates just a command unit which can control other units assembled for a specific mission. Many of the division missions are now assigned to brigades, which still retain a personality, often picking up old regimental traditions. I hope you have enjoyed this short journey. I know that I haven't covered many interesting aspects, so if you want me to get into more details about something, so please let me know in the comments below. But for now, thanks for watching and good night.